Hey, good morning, good evening, Mark. How are you?
Hi, Dan. Good morning. How's it going?
Hey, it's going well, man. It's Friday, so I'm excited about that. And we have a great guest coming up on the show today, so that's exciting for me.
Absolutely. We are looking forward to speak to Ron.
Yeah. How are you doing, my friend?
Not too bad. It's been a great week. I know we've been
Yeah,
working on a lot of chat GPT stuff this week, so
I
that's been
know.
exciting. There's a lot
Yeah,
to
I
come
think
out from Question Pro.
every day is Chat GPT this, Chat GPT that, which is exciting. It's a cool technology, so we're excited to integrate it into the platform and do other things, and of course talk about it. So look for some
Absolutely.
upcoming articles and content from us on that for sure. I know some of the things we wanted to talk about, and it's probably closely related because I believe in
hmm
the 2023 trends report that we released is around generative AI and Chat GPT. So we released a 2023 trends report. Check it out. Mark will put the
I'm
link
just putting it in, yeah.
in the comments so you can go ahead and download that for free. It talks about 5 different trends that we've uncovered that we think will continue on in 2023. So shout out to Danielle on the marketing team here who helped put that together. And
I
then
know
we
that was really
also,
great.
yeah, it was really good. And then on the 26th, I guess next Thursday already, Mark, is a webinar around consumer trends. And
Absolutely.
this is with Steve Krause, who's a professor at the University of San Francisco, and John Last, who has a company, the Sports Leisure Group. And he does a barometer. Steve and I kind of partner on a survey around different trends, and we talk about what was in 2022, and then what's coming up in 2023. So more from a consumer perspective, but then we'll also be covering some of those market research trends and so forth. So yeah, that's good. Anoop
I just put the
says
link in there, yeah.
talking. Anoop said talking about Chat GPT again. Oh, nice. Okay. Anoop's all about it. I like it. Thank you, Anoop. Awesome. So those are some events and some materials that we have here at Question Pro. So make sure you check those out. And I think, Mark, without further ado, I know we have a lot to talk about with Ron here. So
Ron,
let's bring
absolutely.
Ron into the show. Hey, Ron, welcome.
No,
Hi, Ron. Good morning.
nice to meet you both.
Yeah,
Great to have you on.
likewise, Ron. So we were kind of chatting a little bit before the show, and I wanted to get maybe tell people about your background. And I know you have a stop in Asia, which I want to talk about a little bit. So maybe give a brief
Interesting.
description of your background and then kind of where you're at now.
Yeah. So, I worked for 2 major banks doing market research. I was their insights director for 2 major banks, one in Utah and one up in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And, my job there was helping senior executives make decisions, right? And I loved doing that. I was a peer to most of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty challenging because you didn't want to be wrong, right? I learned a thing or two about doing research right, so that it came out positively. One of the banks I was with, when there was a mortgage loan downturn in 2008, when that collapse
hmm
happened, Washington Mutual Bank, where I was at, didn't
Mm-hmm.
survive. So Chase
Mm-hmm.
Bank got them, and
Yeah, I remember that.
I left and went to
Yeah.
Coca-Cola. I became the insights director for Coca-Cola in Asia.
Oh,
So I lived
wow.
in Hong Kong for
Nice.
18 months. I lived in Thailand for 6.5 years, and I traveled all throughout Asia, helping China, Japan, Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, 14 different countries,
Wow, that's amazing.
with their research and strategy needs, right? So that
That's
was kind of
amazing.
fun.
Ron, Washington Mutual holds a special place in my heart because it was the first bank that I ever signed up for. So
Really,
yeah, I remember
Nice.
I got
it
my
was
first
great while it lasted.
I know,
It
I loved it. I was like, oh, I got my first paycheck, and I'm like, well, what do I do with this? Our mom said, well, we need to open you an account. So I took it down there and got it.
Yeah, it
But
was a good
yeah,
thing. Few poor
yeah,
choices along the way, but a great bank.
yeah, amazing. So Coca-Cola. So you moved to Asia for this. Obviously, you mentioned Hong Kong and Thailand. What are some interesting stories that you can share? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I am
Interestingly
too.
enough, an interesting thing is I was fortunate to go to Myanmar. I don't know if you've heard of Myanmar or Burma
No,
before,
no,
Yeah.
but it was closed to all U.S. Business
hmm.
until Obama got in, and then relationships were opened and modified. And I was one of the very first people to go in for a business point of view to figure out how Coca-Cola could enter in that country. And I spent 3 weeks kind of going the length and breadth of Myanmar, getting to know the people, getting to understand what the company ought to keep in mind, and sharing our thoughts is the best way to go forward.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was really something.
What a unique experience too. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
So
I was
ever
in a
been
lot
to
of
India,
people's
Rod?
homes. It was actually, I was in a lot of people's homes, went out to dinner with people there. I mean, they were so kind, it was a wonderful experience. And they were not afraid to, just welcome in a new opportunity there either. It was a very fascinating thing.
Awesome.
Southeast Asia is very nice. Yeah.
And Mark, you were asking if Ron had ever been to India. Is that right?
Yeah. Have you been to India?
Yeah, several times. So both in New Delhi, where I spent some time, but also down in Mumbai, and
Awesome.
also I spent some time in the poorest parts of India to figure out how expansion could realistically be, how we could help in those communities. So it was a fascinating thing to spend some time in India.
Yeah, that's
Very
amazing.
interesting. Damn cool.
Yeah, really cool. And then, so from Coca-Cola, you started up Mobile Digital Insights. Is that right?
Right. So I always wanted my own research company, and I started that. And I partnered with a company, Mobile Digital Insights, that was in Australia. So I did the North and South America business, and the Australia business continued. And so I did that for 5 years, enjoyed my great relationships with them. But along the way, while we were doing work with Mobile Digital Insights, we were working with Coca-Cola, KFC, T-Mobile, some very nice companies. Like we had a great client list. And along the way, a city manager of a city in Texas approached me and asked me if I would help him with his annual citizen survey. And I had never done an annual citizen survey. So I looked at what he had, and it was an interesting survey. Let me just say, it was probably about 20 minutes long, covered a lot of ground, and I could tell from the get-go it was almost impossible to make good decisions with. Like it's just a lot of information, tons of information. As a matter of fact, so much you couldn't even figure out what to do.
Wow.
And so I just said, well, I can help you. And so we thoughtfully redesigned it. As a matter of fact, I got 2 or 3 other city surveys just to get my mind around what is happening in the industry, and just crafted a totally unique approach to help him achieve what he wanted to achieve and get what he wanted to get. He loved it. I loved it. And actually, when I finished, I said, I like this more than helping businesses. Like, I don't mind helping businesses, but I enjoyed it more helping these communities, right? And these city leaders. And it was really fulfilling for me. And so I said, that's what I want to do for a business. So I unwound myself from the other company and started up On Point Insights. And now my focus is cities.
Wow. And that was recently then, Ron, or what?
It's been, I've been thinking about it for a while, but I really just started last year.
Oh, interesting. What city was it in Texas? Can you share?
Bernie, Texas.
Bernie, Texas. Okay. I'm in Round Rock, Texas, but Bernie, Texas.
Boerne, Bernie, Texas.
Okay.
It's a German town, and
cool.
And I'm doing the second round for them. They loved it, and we're doing the second time. So
interesting. Actually, this is total side note, but there's a lot of German influence in Texas. So there's a lot of these small German towns which are great to go to because they have good German food and good German beer too. So as a side note.
Well, probably in Bernie too.
Probably. Have to check that out. Awesome. So what were some of the, can you give some context around the challenges that we're facing that, kind of led to the
what I did? I pulled together a couple of slides, and I'm going to share them. It'll make it easier for me to talk to, and maybe easier to even visualize. So I'm going to share my screen share. Okay, perfect. So I'm sharing my screen, and now I'm going to go to PowerPoint, and I'm going to do. I'm going to share
add it to the stream. Yeah.
Can you see that? Okay.
Yeah, this is
yes,
great.
We can see it fine.
Okay, so let me give you an example of what it is. So, so his survey, and it's not unlike many surveys. So he had in the survey there were a variety of question types. How much do you agree or disagree with the following? And they had a list, right? Or how satisfied are you with the following? And they had a list. And sometimes they had like 10 in one, and then another one, and they just had all these lists. And how would you rate the service provided by some group, right? And you had the list.
Pretty run of the mill questions, kind of like you see it on every.
There were a lot of these, and they had other things in there as well, but they had a lot of them. And so the first thing I noticed is we've got multiple scales there. How do you compare the agree, disagree, satisfied, dissatisfied, good, very good, right? And so there was multiple scales, and really the survey itself was unified around the question type, and not the topic or theme so much, right? So they were kind of oriented around that. And also, I found that the same question, it was like phrased slightly differently, but it was in like all three places sometimes, where how are we doing about this, and then how satisfied are you with this, and then how would you rate the service of this, but it was essentially the same question, sometimes asked 2 or 3 ways,
right?
And then oftentimes when we got the results, you'd say, okay, like you'd show the top 2 box or whatever, and everything was top 2 box with minor variations, right?
Yeah.
And you couldn't really tell. And in the end, there were 54 questions that people had to answer, and so it was a pretty long and frustrating survey. And this is like the core of the survey. Maybe this took about 10 to 15 minutes long. Then they had other open-ended questions and so forth to try to follow up and get their mind around it. And in the end, you had 20 minutes of drudgery for these poor citizens, right?
Yeah. Right. That's true. I mean, these long matrix questions and things that are really repetitive,
like they work, but they don't, but that was the challenge. And so he had these, he spent, like this city manager, he said 120 hours analyzing the data. Whoa. And in the end, he had a beautiful 100-page deck or so that he put together, but they still didn't know where they were going.
Right.
So they just had pages and pages of information and insights, but no clarity of direction. And so I took this, and when I did it, the challenge was, when we looked at it, like, all right, how do we get to the vital few things to do? How do we know what they are? And there's this, cities have, like, everybody, they have all of these constituents who want something. They want a ballpark, or they want pickleball courts, they want parks, they want roads, they want infrastructure, they want, they have all of these things. How do we look at that, and still how do we keep the survey short? Like, that was my challenge.
Yeah, right.
As I thought about it, because I like a 10-minute survey, or no longer, right? I like to keep it around 10 minutes, and they were 20, and so the approach I took was, I call it the concerns of the many framework. And so what I did was I took all of those different comments and I broke them down, or all the different questions, and I broke them down into themes. Theme 1, theme 2, theme 3, theme 4, theme 5. So I broke them down into themes. And what were they trying to get at in these themes? And I tried to make sure a theme had no more than 10 questions in it. And if there were more than 10, we would kind of group them together, or we make sure that we really only talking about a single topic. And we without problem, we could get to the themes. And so then we very simply asked people at the beginning, we said, this is going to be slightly repetitive, but what we'd like you to do is look at this list and tell us which 2 are most important to you. And then we would go on to the next, and they would pick their top 2 out of 10, or 9 or 8, or whatever they had in that group of themes. And then which 2 are most important to you in the next theme, and in the next one, and the next one. They would get through them in about 30 seconds a piece. They're going through, click, click, click. They're picking their thing. By the time they got to the end, they had selected 10 items out of 50 that were most important to them. And then we said, all right, perfect. Now that you've picked your 10, we're going to show you the 10 that you picked. And now we'd like to have you rate them. So people only rate the things that were most important to them, number 1.
Makes sense.
And they rate those 10. And so I mean, the issue is now, in this case, we have one scale for importance all the way through, and we really have one scale for performance all the way through. People have rated what's most important to them. The survey is half as long, and it works really great. And the way it works, I'm going to just show you a slide here really briefly. But
Yeah,
the way it works.
One question. So, is there a reason you stuck with 2, or was it just because not 3?
I have tried 3, and I've even tried 3 or 4, and I even tried it a couple of different ways. I had a 2 most important, 2 least important. When I did it, I went the most important, least important. And so I've tried it a variety of ways. I have tried 3. I've found that whatever the number is that you have, if you divide by 4, that's a good number to have, right? So like if you have 16 and you divide by 4, you could pick the top 4. If you have 12 and you divide by 4, you could have 3. But if you have 10 or fewer, 2 works really about the best.
Yeah.
And the reason why is like my first choice and my second choice, they're pretty important. My third choice is important, but then everybody's third choice starts watering things down, and you begin to get a lot of this, you get less differentiation.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes
sense. Ambiguity,
And then so let's say you have 5 here, and then each one, they pick their 2 most important. They roll into the 10. Do you have them rate that 10 as well, or?
So then all they have done is they've rated the 2 most important. We could rate the top 10. But in this case, we get the very good, the very poor, and you really have everybody's top. You actually have everybody's top 10 out of 50. Out of 50, you have their top 10. Now, there's some benefits in it, and I'll show you the benefits. The challenge is it does need a little bit more sample size, and I've got somebody who just gave me a call. I'll tell them I'll call him back later.
All right.
But you do need a little bit more sample size if you're going to slice and dice down to details, right? Because the very good to very poor ratings are only among those who picked it as being very important.
Got it. And then, Anoop had one question here. So you have a scale for importance, but what's the scale for performance? Can you explain that?
Yeah, in this particular case, it could be any scale you want, but we use very good, good, okay, poor, very poor.
Got it.
So how are we doing on these attributes is the question. We could say, how satisfied are you with the way we're doing this? And the only reason I picked that is because it's short and simple, right?
Got it. Yeah.
But there's no reason why you couldn't have it be a strongly agree or a very satisfied. I happen to choose very good to very poor, and it worked perfectly.
Got it. That makes sense. So it's kind of like the importance satisfaction, but you have importance and performance. Those 2 things makes sense. Awesome. So you have this framework, and then you roll it into. You're going to show another thing that you roll.
Yeah, here's an example of the way it looks. So on the left, what you have is what's most important, right? The 2 that are most important in this group. This is within a group, and so you get the 2 that are most important. They rate them, and you can see 51% said city parks, pavilions, benches, playground. That was the most important to them out of this category, this theme. But only 5% said the community center was the most important thing to them. Now, the 5% at the bottom still were asked about the community center. How are we doing? Please rate us very good to poor, very poor. But in general, they're doing pretty good, right? I mean, the community center, so there are people who consider it very important, and hey, it's not a problem.
Right.
And the library, 25% said, hey, the library is the most important to me in this list. You got that. And hey, the library is doing pretty good, But the walking trails was second in importance, and it looks like there's some room to improve, right? Yeah. So here, a city can very quickly see then, like, where to focus, and it's true. Some people want some dog parks, and maybe it's like not even a bad idea to do dog parks, right? I mean, you just realize it's not the most important thing,
right? Makes sense.
For the majority of the people. And so it's a niche thing. And by the way, if you've addressed the things up in the top where you feel pretty good about it, move on down to the other things that are lower importance. And so just, in a really quick summary, I mean, that is the core methodology.
That's interesting. I mean, things like walking trails are probably, really important. Some of those from like a city perspective might be harder to implement, right? But you may want to move on down and say, hey, we can get this, the food truck thing is easier, whatever it might be, but it
Correct.
definitely gives clear sort of view into what you need to work on and what might be the
Correct.
most
And
or
the
least
beauty
level of
is
effort.
they can do this in safety and security. They can do this in like infrastructure and roads. They can do this for each of the various topics that we have. And then within them, they can know what's going well and where there's room to improve. And so the beauty of it is in truth, I don't have to tell them where to focus. Do you know how when you get to the end, you say, here's where you should focus? Well, in truth, I can tell them that, but they can tell me where they should focus, right? And so oftentimes when I present this to a city, I give them the results and I have them walk me through the findings and tell me what they think it ought to be done, right? Because it's so obvious and intuitive that they don't have to wonder. And so the 120 hours of work that the manager spent in Bernie trying to figure out where they should go, he can actually not try to digest the data. He can try to figure out now the solutions.
Right. Spend more time on what to do with the data than just
he spends like no time on now the analysis. It's obvious and done.
That's interesting because you talk a lot about, or I think the industry talks a lot about storytelling with data, but this kind of tells the story in itself, so it takes a lot of the work out.
Yeah.
That's
I will tell you, it's very interesting. I've been speaking with city leaders across the country, and one of them I was talking to recently. And here I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I'm going to stop sharing here. Okay. I'm back. Okay. So what I'm going to do, what I found, I was speaking with city leaders across the country, and a couple of them I said, hey, do you do citizen surveys? And they go, yeah, we do them. And I said, how's it working for you? And he goes, well, you need a PhD in statistics to understand it. And I said, really?
You laughed like,
and I said, you know what? That's not the problem. The problem is the person on the other side doesn't know what to tell you what to do either. They're clueless. They have no idea. The survey design is not intuitive enough that either of you can figure out the way to go. And so it's not like you need a PhD in statistics. You just have a failure of design.
Right. That's true.
To make it intuitive.
And then I know, Ron, you use. I'll give a quick plug here. I know you use Question Pro for this.
Yeah,
how was Question Pro able to help you out where?
Let me tell you, Dan, when I looked, I knew what I needed to do to accomplish, and I had not chosen a survey supplier for this, right? So I cast a broad net and looked at many companies, many well-known companies in the top. A lot of them claimed they could do it, and then I would do a trial, and they couldn't do it easily. It was really difficult. And then a lot of them claimed they could do it, and frankly, they couldn't. Because one of the things you have to do is you have to be able to take questions that were asked 5 before, and you have to be able to then put all 10 of them in front of somebody to rate them.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's not a simple extraction from one and presentation of the other. It's an extraction from 5 and a presentation in one.
Yep.
So it's a from many to one. And that's not easy to do. So when I created it in my first city, I didn't use Question Pro. I used another, and we got it done. But the amount of work I had to do to make it work was a job in and of itself. And then Question Pro, on the other hand, look, it wasn't 100% easy for Question Pro either. And I know Question Pro is rewriting and creating solutions so that this particular need can be addressed easier. But I was able to do it nonetheless. I got some great coaching, and within, it took me a day to write the code. To write the code and to do all the extractions so that it would work. It took me a while, but then it worked flawlessly for the next city, because I had already put in the work into it. But I know Question Pro is working on it so that need doesn't exist. It's just a simple extraction. And
we are. Yeah. Actually, I just talked with the development team about it this week, so I know we're working on it. So
that's
this is awesome.
Yeah, but so Question Pro, number one, Question Pro was able to do it. they were able to do it so that I could do it repeatably, easily.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were able to do it so that, and they were able to modify to even accommodate this kind of a need for others in the future, so it's not so difficult for anybody.
Right. That makes sense. That's awesome. Ron, hey, thanks so much for sharing, your groundbreaking model that, Viv told me, like, hey, you got to get Ron on the show. He has this model. So I'm excited. I was curious about it.
It is unique. Like I've never seen it anywhere, right? Like this
it's really unique. Yeah.
It's super unique and interesting. And what a way to sort of make sense of the data. Like, I think you did a phenomenal job there.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it is city leaders have just simply loved it.
Yeah.
Like they just loved it. And because it doesn't take anything more than a good set of eyes and a little bit of judgment to know what to do. You know what I mean? It's not like this doesn't apply to everything, but there are certain situations where it probably is the best approach, and a very good approach. And when there is a large number of challenges that you have to choose between and sort through, this works.
Yeah, it does. Works. I'm sure.
It's when you go from the many down to the few. And I was speaking with a city leader, and the person just said, "What makes your model unique?" And I said, "Well, it focuses on the needs of the many."
Mm. It's a perfect way to explain it. I mean, it really is, and it makes sense. Yeah. It's easy.
Yeah, and somebody said, "Well, what are the needs of the many?" Like, and then they were kind of mocking because in today's society, government is kind of like, it's tough because government's going all kinds of different directions. And what this does is this helps city leaders not lose sight of the needs of everyone that are so common, and not get wrapped up around the things that are just kind of one-offs. And they're very important. Like all of them are important, but some you don't want to lose sight of the needs of the many.
Right. And I think you can have a vocal minority too, right? That you're like, oh, we need to tackle this, but then you do the survey and it's like, actually, that's towards the bottom. Most people don't even want that. So
that's precisely what happens.
Yeah, I bet.
Precisely what happens, right?
I bet.
And it just allows city leaders cover to, like, they can get to that, but only after they focus and assure that the needs of the many are thoughtfully met. And it keeps them from being pulled into directions that are meaningful, but maybe not as meaningful right now.
Right.
To the majority.
Yeah. So, Ron, one I think final question I had, and more around response rates. So the traditional model that cities were doing with, let's say the 54 questions, 20 minutes, and you take it down and you go 10 minutes. I'm guessing the response rate is obviously higher, right? But is that?
I'll have to confess, I don't know, but I can say yes. But let me tell you where we come from. So when we had the first time I did Bernie, the first city, we got around 800 responses, which was pretty good for the city.
Yeah.
Which is pretty good. The second time we did it, we're over 1,300 right now.
Wow.
Right. And so citizens who took it the first time and took it the second time became more engaged the second time.
Yeah.
And my own city, I did it in my own city where I live in Utah, Elk Ridge, Utah. It's a town of 4,000, right? This little town. But I did it for them so that I could do a proof of concept before I rolled live with Bernie. So I did it for them. First time around, we got 500, which we were impressed.
That's
Second
great.
time, 700. So, we're getting about a 20 to 30% increase the second time around over the first. And I think part of it is that, right? That the willingness to participate, because the survey is short and it's also intuitive and pretty easy to take, makes for a difference.
Yeah, I think so. Especially if word gets out. And I think if city leaders can attach it back, like, hey, we came up with this project, or we did this because this is what you wanted when you took that survey, right? And then maybe that doesn't catch on, but in my head, I can see that.
No, I'm with you. Hey, so Dan, if you go to Saginaw, Texas, or Capel, Texas, or you'll find, or West University Place, Texas, you'll find on their websites the results of the survey.
Interesting.
And it's there for everyone to saying, thank you for participating in the survey. Here it is. And the way we present it to you, it's even more intuitive for the city leaders. I'm not going into detail on that because it's another topic. But it's like so intuitive to go and look at the results and to see what it is. And they make it available for everyone to see.
That's amazing.
Very interesting.
Awesome. Hey, Ron, thanks for coming on today. Where can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about it? Is LinkedIn a good way?
You know what? I should have given the name of the company, but it's On Point Insights. So how do I do it? You know what? No, I'll just, so I'll spell it out. So On Point is ONPOINTE. So On Point with an E on the end, dash insights.com. That's my website. Perfect. And then if you want to call me, it's Ron at onpoint-insights.com. On Point with an E.
Great. No, that's awesome. We'll Mark, let's update the description too, so we can make sure that's in there.
I just did that. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll get that in there too.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, Ron, thanks so much.
I want to give a plug. You know, the Qualtrics. I'm sorry, I said Qualtrics, and I should have said that.
Okay.
Hey, that just
that's fine.
That's a
the Question Pro team has been amazing to work with, as opposed to others. So, awesome. You know, and I want to thank you for your great collaboration.
Absolutely, anytime. And I definitely want to have you back on because I have more questions, but we'll have to do a part 2 at some point. And
I would be glad to do a part 2 because I have a lot to share.
Awesome. Sounds great.
I love that.
Hey, Ron, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
You bet.
And have a good day.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Take care.
See you guys.